My abusive parents used my paychecks to fund their gambling, tried to blackmail me with therapy notes, and when I refused to co-sign a loan, they showed up with a vial of sedatives. Growing up, I could never hang out with my friends because of my parents, but not in the way you're thinking. They let me see them. In fact, they would sometimes beg me to leave the house and see them, except I didn't want to. I wanted to spend my summer cleaning the house, dust the corners of every room, do the laundry, because I thought to myself that one day, I would move out, and my parents would realize how much I did for them while I was still here. This is what got me through all the nights they would congratulate my brother Luke for every little thing, whilst wailing on me for not doing more. One time, when I was 15, I repainted the entire garage and even bought the paint with money I had earned through babysitting. But when I showed my dad, his hand met my face, because I had used the wrong color. Meanwhile, not even a week later, Luke borrowed my parents' car and crashed it. My parents' immediate reaction? "You're so brave for trying new things, honey." But the biggest shock came when I, now 26, told them I wanted to be a doctor 6 years ago. They told me that since I was going to make a lot of money, I had to start giving them 80% of my minimum wage job paycheck, because I would be able to pay back any loan, especially since Luke didn't plan on working or going to college. I would have said no, but that's when my mom started crying and telling me how much they were struggling. I settled on giving them 20%, and when I moved out, I knew I had made the right choice. Fast forward to August, when I had my white coat ceremony. I had graduated from my bachelor's degree at the top of my class, and for the first time, I actually believed in myself. I could say no to people without feeling guilty or explaining myself. I didn't cringe at every little thing I said anymore, and that's when my parents slipped back into my life. Not to shout at me, or even scold me. They reached out to humbly ask if they could attend my white jacket ceremony. It was an email, and at the end it was signed, "Love, your parents XX." The word love alone made me tear up. The last time we had spoken was 2 years prior, when one of my payment contributions didn't go through, and before that, it was crickets. So this was amazing. Fireworks were practically going off in my head. It was the moment I had dreamed about, as I scrubbed the house all those years ago. I was so quick to celebrate that I didn't even give myself time to be skeptical. I just did what my inner child told me to do, and typed, yes. And as the white coat was put on me, I felt prouder than ever. It was two of my biggest dreams coming true, my parents applauding me and becoming a doctor. That day, I smiled so much my cheekbones actually started to ache. Then the next day, I was debating on whether or not I should invite them over for dinner, maybe start a snowball effect on rebuilding our relationship. And that evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an iMessage group chat with me, Luke, and my parents. They didn't say anything. It was just a PDF link my dad had sent. I daydreamed about it being travel plans, or even a formal birthday party invite. But when I clicked on it, my heart dropped. It was a form to co-sign a small loan of $150,000 for Luke. Then Luke sent a message. "It's the least you can do now that you're going to be rich." No one else said anything. "No thanks for letting us come yesterday." "No, we're so proud." "No congratulations." I couldn't help but laugh. I had no problem with co-signing a lease. I still believe everyone deserves a second chance. But Luke, of all people, and not even a please or thank you, just entitlement? I stopped myself from sending death threats and plugged out my Wi-Fi box to force myself to reflect before acting. It wasn't until 2 days later that I could finally bring myself to reply. I told my brother I would not co-sign, but instead, I would send $60,000 to his bank account. No strings attached. I could have just left it at that, but my inner child refused. So again, I let him take over. I took photos of all the scars they gave me and sent them all, reminding them of the story behind each one. The one behind my elbow? I asked Dad why Luke was getting dessert while I wasn't getting any dinner. The one on my knee? I asked my mom why Luke had stolen all my savings. I finished off the message by telling them my therapist believed they're narcissistic, emotional abusers who need serious help. Blocking them was the biggest high I'd ever felt, even more than the white coat ceremony. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. I anticipated my phone being flooded, for my emails to be spammed. So when it happened, I wasn't even fazed. But then there was something I never saw coming. Luke texted me on another number, apologizing. That's when things got weird. His message was long and rambling, talking about how sorry he was for everything. He said our parents had been manipulating him too, that they'd threatened to kick him out if he ever stood up for me. According to Luke, they forced him to send that loan text and were holding something over his head. He claimed they wouldn't let him get a job or go to college, keeping him dependent on them. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me thought this was just another manipulation tactic, but something about the desperation in his messages seemed genuine. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my apartment the next day. I figured a public place was safer, just in case. The night before our meeting, I barely slept. My mind raced with conflicting emotions. Hope that maybe my brother wasn't the person I thought he was. Fear that this could be another elaborate scheme to get money from me. And a deep sadness that my family dynamics were so fundamentally broken. I called my therapist's emergency line at 2 a.m., and she talked me through some grounding exercises to help me prepare for whatever might happen. When I saw Luke, I barely recognized him. He looked thin, anxious, and kept checking his phone every few seconds. He told me our parents had no idea he was meeting me. According to him, they monitored his phone and bank accounts, but he'd managed to get a burner phone that a friend had bought for him. He only used the burner phone outside the house and kept it hidden in a hollowed-out book when he was at home. "They're worse than you think," he whispered, leaning across the table. "They've been using me to hurt you all these years. Whenever I tried to be nice to you, they'd wait until you weren't around," and he trailed off, rolling up his sleeve to show me scars I'd never seen before. I felt sick. All those years I'd resented Luke for being the golden child, and he'd been suffering too. I asked why he never told me, and he said they threatened to hurt me worse if he ever did. I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but the fear in his eyes seemed real. The coffee shop buzzed with normal activity around us, baristas calling out orders, students typing on laptops, couples engaged in lighthearted conversation. The contrast between that everyday normality and the horror story unfolding at our table made everything feel surreal. I ordered us both some water and sandwiches, noticing how Luke's hands trembled as he reached for his glass. Before he left, he handed me a flash drive. "I've been collecting evidence," he said. "Bank statements showing where your money really went. Recordings of them planning how to get money from you. They need that loan because they're in debt up to their eyeballs from gambling. They've been maxing out credit cards and taking personal loans just to keep up appearances and fund their habit. That night, I plugged in the flash drive. There were dozens of audio files and documents. I clicked on one recording and heard my mom's voice clearly. Once she's a doctor, we'll never have to work again. Luke, remember to act pathetic when you ask for the loan. She always had a soft spot for you. My dad's voice responded. If she refuses, we have other ways to convince her. Remember those pills we got? They'll make her more agreeable. I felt cold all over. They weren't just planning to take my money. They were planning something much worse. As I scrolled through the documents, I found bank statements showing that the 20% of my paycheck I'd been giving them hadn't gone toward bills at all. They'd been funding gambling trips to Vegas and Atlantic City. They had made a lifestyle of appearing wealthy while secretly drowning in debt, using my money and borrowed funds to maintain their facade. The next file nearly made me throw up. It was a photo of my childhood bedroom, but it had been converted into some kind of shrine with medical textbooks, photos of me, and even some of my old clothes. They'd written dates and dollar amounts next to each item, like they were cataloging their investment in me. I immediately called Luke, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I've seen everything, I said when he answered. What do we do now? Luke sounded genuinely relieved when I called. Thank God you believe me, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I wasn't sure you would after everything. I paced around my apartment, mind racing. These recordings, they're planning something beyond just taking my money. We need to figure out what to do. The next morning, I met Luke again, this time at a park where we could talk without worrying about being overheard. He looked even worse than before, dark circles under his eyes, constantly glancing over his shoulder. He told me he'd snuck out while our parents were meeting with someone about refinancing their house. They're obsessed with you, Luke said, picking at a loose thread on his jacket sleeve. Like, in a really creepy way. After you moved out, they kept your room exactly the same for a while. Then they started turning it into this, I don't know, like a control center? They have calendars tracking your school schedule, your work hours, even when you go to the gym. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the warm day. How do they know all that? They hired someone to follow you for a while, he admitted. Some guy Dad met through his gambling buddies. When that got too expensive, they made fake social media accounts to follow you. Mom even pretended to be a classmate once to get added to some group chat. This was so much worse than I thought. I'd been focused on escaping their emotional abuse, never considering they might be stalking me. I pulled out my phone and showed Luke some recent strange occurrences. A car I'd noticed parked near my apartment several times, flowers delivered to my door with no sender name. Luke nodded grimly. That's them. Dad bought that car specifically because it's common enough not to stand out. And Mom sends gifts sometimes to test if you're home. If you accept the delivery, she knows your schedule. We spent the next few hours developing a plan. First, I needed to secure my apartment. I called my landlord and explained I had concerns about security, leaving out the disturbing details. They agreed to change my locks and add a security camera at my door. I now realized with horror that my parents had copies of my keys. They'd bribed the building manager to make copies when I was signing the lease. That's why changing the locks was crucial. I also withdrew some cash from my account. Not enough to alert my parents if they somehow had access, but enough to get by if things went south. Luke and I agreed to meet again in 3 days. He was gathering more evidence, financial records, emails, anything that could help us understand what they were planning. In the meantime, I needed to act normal. If my parents suspected I knew anything, who knows what they might do. Those 3 days were some of the longest of my life. I jumped at every noise in my apartment. I took different routes to school, parked in different lots, and started looking over my shoulder constantly. I told a couple of classmates I trusted that I was dealing with some family issues and might need help, without going into specifics. The constant vigilance was exhausting. I found myself checking window locks multiple times before sleeping and keeping the bathroom door open when showering to hear if anyone entered my apartment. Each night, I slept with the lights on, too paranoid to surrender to complete darkness. When my phone rang with an unknown number, my heart nearly stopped. It was my mother. Honey, we haven't heard from you, she said, her voice sickly sweet. We came all the way to your ceremony and you haven't even thanked us properly. I gripped the phone tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. Sorry, I've been really busy with school. Thanks for coming. That's all? After everything we've done for you? We raised you, supported you, and now you're too good for us? Her tone shifted instantly from sweet to accusatory. We need an answer about that loan for Luke. He really needs it, and it's the least you could do for family. I manufactured an excuse about needing to check my finances and promised to get back to them soon. As soon as I hung up, I felt physically ill. Their voices had controlled me for so long that even now, knowing what they were planning, I struggled to stand up to them. I sat on my kitchen floor for nearly an hour afterward, trying to calm my racing heart and stop my hands from shaking. It was astonishing how quickly they could trigger that primal fear in me, even through a simple phone call. When I finally met Luke again, he handed me a thumb drive with shaking hands. It's worse than we thought, he said. They've been accessing your medical records somehow. They have copies of your prescriptions, your therapy notes, everything. I felt violated in a way I couldn't even describe. How is that possible? Mom befriended someone at your doctor's office, Luke explained. She's been doing this for years, making friends with people in positions to give her information about you. There's a reason they pushed you to stay with Dr. Wilson even when you wanted to switch doctors. I remembered how insistent they'd been that I keep seeing my childhood physician. At the time, I thought they were just being practical since he knew my medical history. Now it made horrifying sense. Luke continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's more. They're planning to come to your apartment this weekend. They have a spare key. How? I just changed the locks. I felt panic rising in my chest. They made copies before you moved in, Luke said. They bribed the building manager when you were signing the lease. That's why they insisted on helping you move. Everything was clicking into place. All those helpful gestures, the insistence on knowing my address and schedule, the surprise visits that somehow always caught me at home. They'd never stopped controlling me. They'd just gotten better at hiding it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining them walking into my apartment while I slept. I pushed my dresser in front of the door and slept with a baseball bat next to my bed. The nightmares that plagued me were vivid. My parents standing over me as I slept, injecting something into my arm, dragging me away from my life and back into their control. I woke up several times in a cold sweat, unsure for terrifying seconds if the nightmares had been real. The darkness seemed to close in around me, making every shadow look like a lurking figure waiting to pounce. The next morning, I called in sick to school and went to the police station. The fluorescent lights and bureaucratic atmosphere felt surreal compared to the horror story my life had become. I clutched my folder of evidence like a lifeline as I waited for someone to take my statement. Looking back, I should have known better. The officer listened politely, but explained that without concrete evidence of a threat, there wasn't much they could do. Parents having a key to their adult child's apartment wasn't illegal. Neither was sending flowers or driving past sometimes. The recordings were concerning, he admitted, but since they were obtained without consent, they might not even be admissible if things went to court. I left feeling defeated. The system wasn't designed to protect against the kind of insidious control my parents had mastered. I needed to take matters into my own hands. I withdrew more cash and checked into a motel under a false name. I bought a prepaid phone and called Luke. The motel room was sparse and impersonal, but somehow it felt safer than my own apartment. I drew the blinds tight and sat on the bed, waiting for Luke to answer. "They know," he said immediately. "They found the flash drive missing and went ballistic. Dad hit me so hard I thought he broke my jaw. They're coming for you tonight, not this weekend. They're saying if you won't help the family voluntarily, they'll make sure you have no choice." My blood ran cold. What does that mean? I don't know exactly, but they packed some pills and syringes. Mom kept saying something about how you'll be more manageable when they're done. I think they're planning to tamper you with substances, maybe force you to sign something. I told Luke to meet me at the motel. I gave him the address and room number, making him promise not to tell anyone. 3 hours later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Luke stood there with a black eye and split lip, a small backpack clutched in his hands. "I got out," he said, voice trembling. "Had to climb through the bathroom window. They were arguing about what to do with me. Dad wanted to lock me in the basement until they got back from your place. I pulled him inside and locked the door behind him. For the first time since we were kids, I hugged my brother. He stiffened at first, then broke down, sobbing against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "I should have helped you years ago. I was such a coward." "We were both kids," I replied, feeling a lifetime of resentment toward him beginning to crack. "They pitted us against each other on purpose." Luke opened his backpack and pulled out a folder. "I grabbed these before I left. All their financial records, plus some creepy journals Mom keeps about you. There's stuff in here going back to when you were in high school." We spread the papers across the motel bed. Bank statements showed massive gambling debts, loans from people with only first names listed, and regular withdrawals labeled L surveillance. There were medical forms with my information, some with forged signatures. Most disturbing were the notebooks, detailed accounts of my daily activities, notes about my disobedience, and plans for getting control of my future earnings. "Jesus," I whispered, reading a page where my mother had calculated how much money she expected to extract from me over my medical career. The number had 7 figures. "They see me as their retirement plan. They always have," Luke said quietly. "Why do you think they pushed you so hard in school? Why they punished you for any grade less than perfect? They've been investing in you, not raising you." The final pieces fell into place. The chores, the punishments, the impossible standards, all designed to make me compliant, to teach me that my only value was in what I could provide for them. And Luke had been the carrot to my stick, rewarded to show me what I could have if I just obeyed. We stayed up all night formulating a plan. We needed evidence that would actually hold up, something that showed they were actively planning to harm me. Luke suggested we use their own tactics against them. "You need to meet with them," he said. "Somewhere public, but where we can record everything. Tell them you'll discuss the loan. Get them to admit what they're really planning." I hated the idea of facing them, but he was right. We needed them on record threatening me. The next morning, I called my mother from the prepaid phone. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, forcing warmth into my voice. "About family and helping each other. Maybe we should talk about this loan situation in person." She immediately agreed, suggesting dinner at their house. I countered with a cafe near campus. Public, safe, with enough noise to mask our recording device. She hesitated but eventually accepted. "Luke's coming too, right?" I asked innocently. "Oh, he's not feeling well," she said smoothly. "Some kind of stomach bug, but your father and I can't wait to see you, sweetheart." After hanging up, I looked at Luke. "They're lying about where you are. They don't know you've left. They probably think I'm still locked in the basement," he said grimly. "Dad put a padlock on the outside of the door years ago for when I got out of control." I felt sick, imagining Luke imprisoned in our childhood home. How had I not known? But then, I'd been so focused on my own survival that I'd missed the signs that he was a victim too, just in a different way. We prepared carefully for the meeting. I wore a button-up shirt with a small recording device hidden in the pocket. Luke would sit at a nearby table, wearing sunglasses and a hat to avoid being recognized. If things went south, he'd intervene. When I arrived at the cafe, my parents were already there. Mom had dressed up, wearing the pearl necklace she saved for special occasions. Dad looked grumpy, but had made an effort with a collar shirt instead of his usual t-shirt. The sight of them, so normal-looking, so much like any other parents meeting their daughter for coffee, made me momentarily doubt everything. Then I remembered the recordings, the journals, Luke's bruised face. I took a deep breath and approached their table, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone in the cafe could hear it. "There's our doctor," Mom exclaimed too loudly, standing to hug me. I forced myself to accept her embrace, feeling the recording device press against my ribs. "We've missed you so much. Where's Luke?" I asked, sitting down across from them. "I thought he'd be here. Terrible stomach flu," Dad said, not meeting my eyes. "Can't keep anything down." I nodded sympathetically. "That's too bad. I'll have to call him later." Mom reached across the table to grab my hand. "So, about this loan situation. We're just trying to help your brother get started in life. You know he's not as academically gifted as you are. What would the loan be for exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. They exchanged a quick glance. "A business opportunity," Dad said vaguely. "Great potential return on investment." "What kind of business?" Another glance. "It's complicated," Mom said. "The important thing is that family helps family. We supported you through college, and now you can help your brother." I took a sip of water, gathering my courage. "Actually, you didn't support me through college. I worked 2 jobs and took out loans. The money I gave you every month was supposed to be for bills because you said you were struggling." Dad's face darkened. "Watch your tone. I'm just stating facts," I said, heart pounding. Where did that money go? Because I saw bank statements showing withdrawals at casinos when you were supposed to be paying for groceries with my money. Mom's grip on my hand tightened painfully. You ungrateful little, she caught herself, looking around at the other cafe patrons. Lowering her voice, she continued, after everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we made. Let's be honest for once, I said quietly. You're in debt from gambling, aren't you? That's what this loan is really for. Dad leaned forward, his voice a threatening whisper. You think you're so smart now with your white coat and your fancy degree, but you're nothing without us. We made you, and if you don't help us with this loan, we'll unmake you. Is that a threat? I asked, feeling the record button pressing against my side. It's a promise, Mom said, her smile returning but not reaching her eyes. We know everything about you, sweetie. Your medications, your therapy sessions, those panic attacks you had in undergrad, one call to the medical board expressing concern about your mental stability, and your career is over before it begins. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. So you admit the loan isn't for Luke at all? Luke is useless, Dad spat. Always has been. You were the investment. All those years pushing you to be perfect, and now you want to abandon us? That's not how this works. Mom's voice turned sickeningly sweet. But it doesn't have to be difficult. Sign for the loan, agree to help us when you're earning a doctor's salary, and everything will be fine. We're family after all. And if I refuse? I asked, needing them to spell it out. Dad smiled, a cold expression I remembered from childhood beatings. Then we'll have to take more direct measures. We still have a key to your apartment. Wouldn't it be a shame if something happened to you? Maybe a medication mix-up? Doctors work such long hours, take so many pills to cope with stress. I stood up abruptly. I need to use the restroom. In the bathroom, I leaned against the wall, breathing hard. They had just threatened to break into my home and potentially poison me with substances. I had it all on tape. I looked at myself in the mirror, seeing not the scared child I'd always been around them, but the strong adult I'd fought to become. My reflection stared back at me with determined eyes that had finally seen the truth about my family. When I returned to the table, I sat down calmly. I've thought about it, and you're right. Family is important. Their faces lit up with identical predatory smiles. I'll help with the loan, I continued, but I need to see documents first. Bring them to my apartment tomorrow night and we'll go over everything. They agreed eagerly, already discussing what they'd do with the money. As I left the cafe, I caught Luke's eye from his table in the corner. Phase 1 complete. That night, we put the final pieces of our plan together. I contacted campus security and explained I had recorded death threats. They agreed to have officers nearby during the planned meeting. I also called 2 of my classmates, who offered to be in my apartment as witnesses. The next day, we prepared my apartment meticulously. We hid cameras in several locations and positioned my friends in the bedroom, out of sight, but able to hear everything. Luke would wait with campus security downstairs. When my parents arrived, I buzzed them up with shaking hands. This was it. The confrontation I'd been both dreading and needing my entire life. They looked smug as they entered, Dad carrying a briefcase full of loan documents. Mom immediately began scanning my apartment, probably looking for valuables or information she could use later. Let's get right to it, Dad said, opening the briefcase on my coffee table. The loan is for $150,000. You'll be the primary signatory, with Luke as co-borrower. I took the papers, pretending to read them. So Luke will be making payments too? Mom laughed. No, of course not. This is your responsibility. Luke has other contributions to the family. Like what? I asked. Dad grunted impatiently. Enough questions. Sign the papers. I set them down. I need to be clear on something first. This money isn't for Luke's business, is it? It's for your gambling debts. Their faces changed instantly. Gone were the loving parent facades, replaced by the cold, calculating people I'd always known them to be. You've gotten bold, Dad said, standing up. Too bold. Maybe you need a reminder of your place. He took a step toward me, hand raised. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch away. Hit me again, I said clearly. It'll be the last time. Mom opened her purse and pulled out a small vial. We didn't want to do this the hard way, but you've left us no choice. One way or another, you're signing those papers tonight. I watched Mom with the vial, my heart beating so fast I thought it might burst through my chest. For a second, I flashed back to being a kid, cowering in fear whenever they raised their voices. But this time, I wasn't backing down. What's in that? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Just something to help you relax, Mom said with that sickening sweet smile. Make you a bit more cooperative. You always were so stubborn. Dad moved closer, blocking the path to my door. This can be easy or hard, your choice. I took a step back, bumping into my coffee table. So you're actually planning to poison me and force me to sign loan documents? That's your brilliant plan? Don't be so dramatic, Mom sighed, unscrewing the vial. It's just a strong sedative. You'll be fine in the morning. Maybe a little confused, but by then it'll be done. And if I call the police afterward? I asked. Dad laughed, a harsh sound I remembered from childhood. And tell them what? That your loving parents who came to your white coat ceremony visited you? Who do you think they'll believe? Respected members of the community? Or someone with a history of therapy and medication for anxiety? That's when I realized just how thoroughly they'd planned this. They would poison me, force my signature, and if I tried to fight it later, they'd make me look unstable. They'd been laying this groundwork for years. You're sick, I said, genuine disgust in my voice. Both of you. Mom's face hardened. Don't talk to us like that. We gave you everything. No, I replied, feeling surprisingly calm now. You gave me nothing but pain and scars, and I have proof of all of it. I reached slowly toward my pocket, and Dad immediately grabbed my wrist, twisting it painfully. What are you doing? He demanded. Getting my phone to show you something, I said through gritted teeth. He released me but stayed close as I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward them. The live feed from the hidden cameras showed them from multiple angles. Mom holding the vial, Dad looming over me. I'm recording everything, I said, and I'm not the only one listening. On cue, my bedroom door opened and my 2 classmates stepped out. Dad's face went from angry to panicked in an instant. Who the hell are they? He demanded. Witnesses, I said simply. Mom tried to slip the vial back into her purse, but I pointed to the camera. Too late. We all saw it. This is ridiculous, she spluttered. We were just trying to help you calm down. You're clearly having some kind of episode. My classmate Jessica, who'd been hiding in the bedroom, crossed her arms. I'm pretty sure I heard you planning to force substance into her and force her to sign loan documents. That's assault and fraud. You have no right to be here, Dad shouted, turning his rage toward her. This is family business, and I have no right to be poisoned in my own home. I shot back. Campus security is downstairs with my brother. Should I call them up? I've never seen my father's face drain of color so quickly. Luke is downstairs? Yeah, I said, feeling a small burst of satisfaction. Turns out he's not sick with a stomach bug after all. He's been helping me gather evidence against you both for days. Mom made a desperate lunge for my phone, but I stepped back quickly. Everything is already backed up to the cloud, I told her, and sent to my lawyer. You can't erase this. You don't have a lawyer, Dad scoffed, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Actually, she does, my other classmate Michael spoke up. My father. He's been quite interested in the recordings we've been sending him. That was a bluff. Michael's dad was a corporate lawyer, not criminal, and we hadn't sent him anything yet, but my parents didn't know that. Dad's face twisted with rage. He lunged toward me, fist raised, completely forgetting about the witnesses and cameras. I flinched, but stood my ground. Before his fist could connect, the apartment door burst open. Luke and 2 campus security officers rushed in. Having been watching the live feed I was streaming to Luke's phone. That's enough, one officer said firmly, stepping between me and my father. Sir, I need you to back up now. Dad looked frantically between the officers, my friends, and Luke. This is all a misunderstanding. We're just having a family discussion. With sedatives? The officer asked, nodding toward my mother's hand where she still clutched the vial. Mom quickly tried to drop it into her purse, but the second officer stopped her. Ma'am, I need to see that. Everything happened quickly after that. The officers took statements from everyone present. I showed them the recordings from earlier at the cafe where my parents had explicitly threatened me. Luke showed them his bruises and described the basement where he'd been locked up. My parents kept insisting we were lying, that we were ungrateful children making up stories, but the evidence was overwhelming. The vial of sedatives, the loan documents, the recordings, the visible bruises on Luke, and multiple witnesses. As the officers were escorting my parents out to call the police, my dad turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? For the first time in my life, I looked him straight in the eye without fear. You did nothing for me except teach me how to survive abuse. That lesson's over now. After they left, I collapsed onto my couch, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Luke sat beside me, both of us staring at the wall in stunned silence. I can't believe we actually did it, he whispered. My friends gave us some privacy, heading to the kitchen to make coffee. I turned to my brother, really seeing him clearly maybe for the first time. I'm sorry I resented you for so long, I told him. I thought you were the favorite. Luke shook his head. I was just a different kind of victim. They used me against you, then punished me whenever I tried to resist. What happens now? I asked, suddenly feeling lost. Now we press charges, he said firmly. Assault, fraud, false imprisonment in my case, and we get restraining orders. The next few weeks were a blur of police statements, court appearances, and sessions with my therapist. My parents were charged with multiple offenses: attempted assault, conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment of Luke, and more. The vial my mother had brought contained a powerful sedative typically prescribed for severe insomnia, which she'd obtained illegally. They hired an expensive lawyer who tried to paint us as ungrateful, mentally unstable children trying to avoid helping our poor parents in their time of need. But the evidence was too strong. The recordings, the sedatives, the bruises, the financial records showing years of financial abuse, it all added up. In the end, they both received probation rather than jail time since neither had prior criminal records. More importantly for me and Luke, we were granted permanent restraining orders. They couldn't come near us, our homes, or our workplaces. The medical school was incredibly supportive once they understood the situation. My academic advisor met with me weekly to make sure I was coping, and they connected me with resources for abuse survivors. I was worried the drama would affect my standing, but if anything, my professors seemed impressed by my resilience. Luke moved into my spare bedroom temporarily. After years of being infantilized and controlled, he struggled with basic adult tasks at first. He didn't know how to open a bank account, had never learned to drive, and had almost no work experience. But he was smart and determined. Within a month, he'd gotten a job at a local bookstore and was taking classes at the community college. One night, about 3 months after everything happened, we were eating takeout on my couch when Luke suddenly looked up from his food. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, he admitted. For them to show up, or for something terrible to happen. Me too, I sighed. My therapist says that's normal. We spent our whole lives walking on eggshells around them. Do you think they'll ever leave us alone for good? He asked. I shrugged. The restraining order means they legally have to, but knowing them, they probably think they can wait us out. That we'll eventually feel guilty and let them back in. Not happening, Luke said firmly. A week later, I received a thick envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a check for $60,000 and a note that simply said, "I'm sorry," in my father's handwriting. I stood there staring at it, feeling nothing but a strange emptiness. I took a photo and sent it to Luke, who called me immediately. Are you going to cash it? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks I should tear it up on principle, but another part thinks I earned this money through years of their abuse. Use it for good, Luke suggested. Something they'd hate. That gave me an idea. I ended up depositing the check and splitting it. Half went into a fund for Luke's education, and the other half I donated to a foundation supporting survivors of family abuse. I made the donation in my parents' names and requested the thank you letter be sent to their address. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. 6 months after the confrontation, life had found a new rhythm. I was thriving in medical school, no longer jumping at shadows or apologizing for existing. Luke had moved into his own small apartment near campus and was maintaining a 4.0 GPA in his classes. We occasionally heard rumors about our parents through distant relatives. They'd moved to Florida, claiming they needed the warm weather for health reasons. The real reason, I suspected, was to escape the shame of everyone in our hometown knowing what they'd done. Sometimes I still had nightmares about them breaking in or hurting me. My therapist said those might never completely go away, but they were becoming less frequent, less powerful. The most unexpected outcome was my relationship with Luke. From reluctant allies, we'd become actual friends and genuine siblings. We had weekly dinners and texted almost daily. He'd become someone I could trust completely, something I'd never thought possible. Last week, I got my grades for the semester. Straight A's, despite everything I'd been through. I took a photo of my grade report and sent it to Luke with the caption, "No one to impress but myself." His reply made me tear up. "Always been impressed by you, sis. Not because of grades or med school, but because you survived them and still managed to be a good person." That night, I looked around my apartment, peaceful, safe, mine, and realized I'd finally broken the cycle. My parents had tried to turn me into their personal ATM, but instead, they'd created something they never intended, a survivor who refused to be a victim anymore.